on your sunglasses because I am almost done blinging out the cover of my book. I just have this little patch, and then I think I might do the spine. I'm actually getting more into this project than I thought I would. But we are not almost finished with this series. We are on chapter 11, and last week I left off at the conference in Denver with Gary Vee and Tony Robbins, and I was going to talk about the dinner with Mike, but Mike pops up later, so I'm not going to get too much into that. I want to go into, after I got back home to Chicago, my strategy was I had set up a meeting with my manager on the Monday after I got back to ask him if I could work remote from Hawaii. And my strategy was to be so delusional with motivation from the seminar that I just strutted in the meeting and asked him, and I would be okay with whatever his response was. Because I will say, I didn't learn this till later on in doing my inner work in earnest, but part of being a functional adult is making the request, but also being okay with hearing the answer, and even if that answer is no. But this was before I had done a lot of inner work on myself, and I was truly in that state of I was okay with whatever happened, because even if he said no, I was determined to figure out a way to find a remote job and work in Hawaii. But again, remember, this was 2018, so it would have been difficult. It wouldn't have been impossible. It would have been difficult, but I was prepared for the challenge. And I did strut into the conference room like all confident, but then I started chickening out when I went in for the ask, because he knew that I went to Florida and worked remote for a month. So I was telling him about how like I have an autoimmune disorder and like all my symptoms went away. So I really want to move to a new climate, a warmer climate. And instead of boldly asking, can I move to Hawaii and work remotely, I was like, well, I wanted to see what you thought about if I moved somewhere warmer, like could I still keep my job and work remotely? And he said, I don't care where you are as long as you get your job done. And so that's when, because at first my nervousness was I didn't know how he was going to react at all. So because he was so laid back about the watered down request, that gave me more confidence and courage to go in for the big request. So I was like, what about Hawaii? And he was like, I don't care where you are as long as you get your work done. And that was it. That's how easy it was. And it was funny because later I was telling one of my friends about it, and he was like, you've been stressing out about this for months, and it was that easy. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, right? So the reason I wanted to tell this story is because I tend to still do this, which is catastrophizing. I think that's how you pronounce it. But it's like you come up with the worst case scenario in your head, and then when you actually do the thing or the thing actually plays out in real life, it's really not that bad. So this is your reminder. And also, it's human nature to catastrophize, I think, sometimes. But this is an exercise that I've started doing that helps a lot. It's like, what are other possible scenarios? Because in that case, yeah, he could have said yes that easily. That wasn't really a scenario I had in mind, but he could have said, yes, but you have to come back so many times a year. Or like, whenever I find myself catastrophizing, what I like to do is write out a list of at least 10 other possible outcomes, because in theory, there could be thousands of other possible outcomes, because we can't even predict someone else's behavior or things outside of ourselves. But I try to challenge myself to come up with at least 10 other possible outcomes along the spectrum, because yeah, that was actually the best possible scenario, but there's other things in between as well. So I wanted to point that out for the lesson on catastrophizing. Again, I don't think I'm pronouncing it right, but if you are like me and tend to come up with the worst possible scenario in your head, then that's a good exercise to do in real time. So then getting into chapter 12. So he said yes, and really that was my biggest obstacle, right? So he said yes. And I should have been all excited. I was excited, but you would think I would be like, okay, now I'm moving. But I was so paralyzed with fear because it's like I had the permission and freedom to go and keep my job that paid well, but I didn't do anything because I was so paralyzed with fear. And I'm now familiar with what is called the freeze response in, because there's fight, flight, freeze, and even fawn we're learning about now. But it was like this visceral body reaction to having the freedom to move to Hawaii. And I'm like, this is so terrifying. And keep in mind, and this is why I have mixed feelings about Tony Robbins. I think his content is amazing. I have learned so much from him. And obviously, that conference in Denver was instrumental to changing the trajectory of my life. But it was also a rah-rah session, meaning my motivational high that I had when I went in and talked to my manager, that lasted like a week and a half, 2 weeks. And then it wears off and you're faced with reality. Like, life is hard, and unless you have practical tools to deal with these challenges as they're happening in real time, that motivation wears off because he just gives you this high level motivation and not like the tools for your day-to-day responses to things. So the motivation started wearing off because real life was happening and I'm like, oh my God, this is scary. What do I do? And then I forgot everything I learned in the seminar, which, by the way, because remember last week I pulled out my notes, I still need to read over those because maybe that'll remind me of some things that I need to implement in my life. But anyway, my whole point is I was frozen in fear because I was like, now what do I do? And when I'm a firm believer, I think I've said this before, when you are not on your life's path, your universe will put you on that path. So I wasn't doing anything, or whatever you believe in. I know some people believe in God or whatever, but I believe in the universe. And so I wasn't doing anything, and the universe is like, come on, you need a kick in the butt. So one day I was coming home and I ran into one of my neighbors in the hallway. I don't know if I mentioned her name in the book. I need to pull up my notes. But anyway, what I was going to say about this neighbor is that her name was Christine and her husband's name was Chris, which I found so funny. But anyway, that's like a total side note. But I ran into Christine in the hallway and we were chatting, and I hadn't told anyone. I think I told that one friend that my manager said yes, that I'm allowed to work remotely in Hawaii. But I don't even think I said okay, now I'm moving. So I hadn't even announced to anyone that I was actually moving. And so we were talking and I'm like, what the hell? I gotta do something, right? So I just casually mentioned to her yeah, I'm moving to Hawaii. And she was like, oh, so are you selling your condo? Are you going to rent it out? And I was like, yeah, I probably want to sell it because, and so this is a behind the scenes moment. There were structural issues in our parking garage, and we had already had one special assessment, and there was another larger one coming down the road. And ideally, I would have liked to keep that condo and rented it out because it was in the Old Town neighborhood of Chicago, which is a super hot spot neighborhood. But I was like, I don't want to deal with the possible implications of repairing this parking garage. So I did want to sell, and I mentioned that to her, and she was like, oh, my best friend's mom is a realtor. Do you want me to give her your information? Or whatever. And I was like, yes. And so I, was in contact with the realtor. I don't even remember her name. Let's just call her Mary. And so we made plans to, her to come over and evaluate my property. And she came over, and I had only owned that condo for 4 years. The market value had already increased by $40,000. And I was like, this is amazing. This is a perfect opportunity. And also I want to mention, because in hindsight, it's crazy how divine timing really lined up for me in this move. Because at the time I asked my manager, that was May 2018, that I asked him if I could move to Hawaii and work remotely. At the beginning of 2018, in January, I worked in IT, and in case you're not familiar, the CIO, it's the Chief Information Officer, it's like the CEO of IT. Well, several years prior, we had gotten a new CEO for the company, and he was cleaning house, so to speak, within the company. And our CIO was let go in January 2018. And I was freaking out. And my manager's like, everything's fine. It's just business as usual. But there were some management changes happening, meaning they were bringing in new people. They had kind of started getting rid of older people. I was kind of concerned about the future of my job, and I had already had these thoughts of like, I want to move to Hawaii. I'm like, is this even going to be possible with a management change? But at that point in time, it was fine. Like, my manager had the ability to tell me like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. But if I would have even waited 3 more months, because there were so many significant changes that happened after he gave me permission, if I would have waited even 3 more months to ask him, the answer would have been no, or maybe let's just wait and see, and that would have turned into a no. So like, the divine timing of me asking him, of the market at the time, because even though Old Town was a hot neighborhood, like, that's a pretty significant market value increase within a matter of 4 years. So that gave me motivation, because I was like, yeah, I want to sell my condo and move. And so that gave me motivation to do more things, because she was asking me, well, when do you want to sell? And I'm like, I don't know, because initially it was just like a lot to think about. So I'm like, let me think about all the other things I need to do, and I'll get back to you on timing. Because in her opinion, all of summer was a good time to sell. So she didn't believe it was urgent or there was a rush. So I was like, let me gather my thoughts and do some more things. So I started, getting moving quotes and just anything to like get the momentum going, because again, even though selling my condo wasn't urgent, I didn't want to be in this state of freeze and being too scared to take any action. So I was like, at least reaching out to that realtor gave me the forward momentum to keep doing small steps. So if you remember, earlier in the year, when moving to Hawaii later in the year felt like a pipe dream, I had reached out to that realtor in Hawaii, and I was like, I'm moving to Hawaii at the end of the year, and this is my budget, which was like $100,000 over my actual budget. So that, I can't remember what chapter that was in that I described when I emailed her, but this is now chapter 12, and I was like, wait a minute, I am now moving to Hawaii at the end of this year, because I didn't think it was happening that fast. Also, and this is another behind the scenes moment, because I kind of just glazed over this in the book because it's a long story within itself. I then, at that time, around May, June 2018, I had the money. I had manifested $100,000 to move to Hawaii. And here's how it happened. Number one, first of all, I didn't even go into any of this in the book, but I did go into how determined I was to move to Hawaii and be a writer. So in my mind, it was working remotely in Hawaii was one obstacle. The other obstacle was I need $100,000 more to be able to afford these condos that I'm looking at on these listings that she's sending me in Hawaii. So because I had stepped into the identity of the person who moves to Hawaii and becomes a writer, all I focused on from the time I emailed her and started getting these listings that were way beyond my budget at that time, all I was thinking about was, in my mind, $100,000. How can I come up with $100,000? And that's all I thought about. Like, I was just so focused on the money. I didn't care where it came from. And again, I think being unattached to the outcome is how it ended up coming to me, because what happened was it came from several different places. One, I received an unexpected raise and bonus at work. 2 was the $40,000 profit from my condo, which wasn't realized until I sold my condo. Also, I had to pay for the realtor fees. But anyway, I still had a profit from my condo, which added to my total. And then here's the other piece, and this is the reason why I didn't go into all of this in the book, because it was way too long of a story within itself, and I didn't want to get sidetracked from the main story. But when my dad passed away, he did not have a will, which wasn't a huge deal because he also didn't have any money. And because my parents got divorced when I was in college, and my sister is not his child. My sister is my half sister from my mom. So I was the sole, whatever it's called. I was the trustee for his estate because I had to get a lawyer. I had to go through probate, which is this huge, long process. But from the very beginning, never in my mind did I think I was even getting a penny, because the only asset he had was his house, which had a loan against it. And so once I sold the house, it was only going to be about a $40,000 profit. But he had a $40,000 credit card debt. And all of that has to get settled in probate. And if there's anything left over, then the trustee or whatever it's called gets anything left over. But because it was basically netting to zero, or could possibly be in the hole, which I wouldn't be accountable for if it was in the hole, but for like the year that it was in probate or whatever, I truly did not think I was getting even a penny, which honestly at some points was kind of frustrating, because like had to talk to the lawyer a lot. Like I had to sell his house, which was like this whole thing because it needed so much work done before it was sold. And I lived in Chicago, his house was in Indiana. So it was actually really stressful. And so I would get frustrated sometimes because it's like, I'm not even getting anything out of this. So it was just like a lot of work. It was a volunteer job basically. But anyway, probate finally got settled and I sold the house, and the attorney was like, I just need to call Chase Bank, pay off this debt, and then I can close everything out. And I'm like, okay, cool. So he called Chase Bank, and for whatever reason that I am unaware of, to this day, they waived the debt. And I've heard people say, well, it's because he passed away and you don't owe any debt when you pass away. I don't think that's how it works with probate. I think with probate, that's like they're in to be able to get the money. So again, to this day, I don't know why, but they waived the debt. So I ended up getting, and it like makes me want to cry because it feels like it was a gift from my dad. And if you remember from the beginning, we're not close at all. So I think like giving me the gift of Hawaii was like something that he wanted to do for me. I'm not going to apologize for crying, but I am going to like gather my thoughts. So like in terms of an actual inheritance, I don't even think I pronounced that right either. Like $40,000 in terms of an inheritance is not that much, but $40,000 is $40,000, and $40,000 brought me to my $100,000 total. So I emailed the realtor in Hawaii, because again, it was like a pipe dream when I initially emailed her in January and was like typing out, like, I'm moving to Hawaii later this month. This is my budget. And here I was in like June 2018, like, yep, I'm moving, and that actually is my budget. I was an imposter no more. So I emailed her, and so, also, I just want to say, like, that whole thing about my dad and getting the money, like, that wasn't in the book, but this part is. So we're getting back to the book and no more behind the scenes. But this realtor, because my whole plan, like, I can't buy a house remotely, right? And I think people started doing that during COVID, but this is like 2018. I was like, I need to be there and be viewing these condos before I buy anything. So my plan was, I'll just find a short-term rental for like 6 months or whatever while I'm looking for a condo, and then I'll buy a condo. So I reached out to her and I was like, yeah, can you help me find this short-term rental? And then when I get there, we can look for a condo to buy. And she was like all snooty. She was like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you with a rental, but let me know when you want to buy. And I was like, oh my God, like I get it that they like don't make money off of rentals, but it's like, I'm buying a condo from you. And in my opinion, my budget wasn't really that cheap. So it's like, you don't want to help me. So that was such a turnoff. But this is the power of like your beliefs and your identity and all of that, because I was not letting anything deter me. I was like, I'm moving to Hawaii. I can just find another realtor. But I was I kind of went into this freeze state. Like, what the hell am I going to do? How am I going to find another realtor? Are all realtors in Hawaii like this? I was like, I don't know what to do. So one day I was like dissociating and scrolling Instagram. And this was back in the day when your feed was your feed. like you didn't have all the ads and stuff, but then you did have the extra explore page, which kind of still works the same, where just random things come up. And because a lot of the accounts that I was following, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but my Instagram, I used to use it as a vision board. So I would follow all these Hawaii accounts and all this stuff that I wanted. And so as I was looking at it every day, I should actually do that again because it was very effective. So you would see all these stuff on your feed that was like your vision board, and like that's how I manifested a lot of stuff actually. But anyway, in my explore page, I see this post, and this was back before reels and stuff, so it was just pictures. It was this guy in Hawaii. He was wearing a business suit and he was surfing, and I was like, I like him. So I click on his post. He was a realtor and his name was Kyle, and he looked like a male model. But I was like, and this was at a time where like DMings was kind of like for thirsty dudes, you know, looking to hook up or whatever. So I'm like, this is so weird that I'm DMing him. But again, I was so determined. I was like, I don't care if this is ridiculous or what. So I DM'd him and I explained the situation, and I was like, can you help me with a rental? And then once I get to Hawaii, and I actually like told him my budget because I was so well versed in all these listings that I was looking at. I was like, these are the areas, this is my budget, this is what I've been looking at. So I was kind of ideal to him because it's like I already knew what I wanted. I just needed someone to help me. I'm sorry, I need to pause again because I want to look. Okay, I was queuing up my notes because they weren't at the place of the story where we were, but that's basically Kyle. So basically Kyle's like, yep, I can help you. So I'm like, boom, that's my realtor. But the cool thing about Kyle that I almost forgot to say, so I'm glad I looked up my notes, is that he had an even better idea. He was like, let's get you in like a 1 month, because I was shipping my furniture and stuff. He's like, let's get you in a 1 month fully furnished rental. Then we'll get you in a short-term rental. Then we'll get you into a condo. And like that felt so much, it felt just so much better because then it wasn't so much stress on the timing of my furniture and all this other stuff. So immediately I loved Kyle is the point I wanted to make. So anyway, all this stuff starts getting set in motion. And I think at this point I had decided that I wanted to sell my condo, like maybe around September, like the end of summer. And then I had this realization, I have to tell my mom, which I knew it wasn't going to go well. So I was like, I'm going to tell her in person because my mom, she would come to visit me sometimes in Chicago. So we already had a weekend planned where she was coming. And so we went out to eat for lunch and I broke the news. And my mom does this thing where she either sounds disgusted or looks disgusted at me. And like, she wouldn't even look at me. She was just like, whoa, that's so far away. What are you going to do about your job? What are you going to do about this? It's so expensive. You don't have any friends there. And so it was just like, first of all, she wasn't even looking at me, which was like beyond disgust. And then all these questions, like I could just tell she was so disgusted with me. And it was like a punch in the stomach because I was so excited. I had always wanted to live in Hawaii. And I was doing it. Like you've heard me talk about in this series, like how hard all of this was for me, not just emotionally, but like finding out how to work remote, all of these things. It was so hard. And there she was raining on my parade. And it just felt really gross. And actually, let me read this part because the main falling out with my dad was when I moved to Chicago because I was so excited that I was moving to Chicago and I told him I was moving and he was like, it's the same thing. Like, it's too expensive there. You're going to hate it. You don't have any friends. He just totally rained on my parade. And since I was the only one really putting any effort into the relationship, I just stopped calling him because it's like, what is the point? You don't care about me. You don't support me. Like, we don't even need to talk anymore. And so after that conversation with my mom, I had the flashback to the conversation with my dad, and it was the same thing all over again. So I say, a huge part of me never wants to talk to mom again after I move. That strategy didn't work out so well with dad, meaning I felt so much guilt after he died. Oh, well, there it is. The pain of wrenching guilt I felt after he died was too unbearable. I know not talking to her is not the answer, but I can't deal with her negativity. I need supportive people right now, and sadly, it can't be mom. And so my critical inner voice was like, nobody supports me. So hold on. I think that's where I'm going to leave it off today. Yes, that's where I'll leave it off today, because the next section is actually where shit starts getting real. So I will leave you in suspense, and next time we will be fully done, hopefully the spine done, and we're really going to get into shit getting real with moving to Hawaii in the next video. So I will see you next time.